Welcome to another episode of TSA Safety Matters. I'm your host, Greg Kerr from Stakeholder Relations, and today we're with John Marshall, TSA's Fuel Safety Director, for a few thoughts on what's happening with the industry and TSA's efforts across the province. So thanks for being with us today, John.
Oh, thank you very much, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Now we're into that season. The snow is melting and we feel that spring in the air. What are the things that we should really start paying attention to in terms of safety now?
Well, I think you're right, Greg. As spring and summer starts to become upon us, I think it's time for us to start thinking about outdoor safety. And so some things that come to mind, first of all, is with digging and excavation, this week we'll see the kickoff by the Ontario Regional Common Ground Alliance about the Dig Safe campaign for this year. And so April is kind of our unofficial start to the dig season, and so we try to make people aware, excavators and homeowners, about the importance of when you're digging to know where fuel lines are and telephone lines and electrical cables and all those things that can put us at risk and the public at risk if we're not sure where they are and we happen to hit those when we're either digging in the street as an excavator or contractor we'd be doing for perhaps doing water main or sewer work or road excavation. But also it's important for homeowners because we all do a lot of work in our gardens. We plant trees, we put in fences. Those same fuel lines can be, and electrical lines can be in our yards as well. So it's important for homeowners as well to get a locate. This is a free locating service offered by the Ontario One Call, and you can call them and they'll within a very few days get somebody out there to mark out anything that may be underground on your property so that we can operate safely.
Mm-hmm. And what's the limit? Is it like within 3 feet or
yes,
with digging?
They usually, when they mark a line, they have a 3 foot either side kind of zone where you have to be cautious about how you're digging and excavating.
You have to hand dig in order to get there, right?
Yes, exactly. And so it's important for homeowners as well as businesses to do this. A lot of times homeowners aren't aware that there's fuel lines in their yard or there's electrical lines, and telephone lines may not seem to be that important, but if there's an emergency and you need to get a hold of 911 and you've cut the telephone line for your neighborhood, it can be an issue too.
I guess it's important too because sometimes with the freezing and thawing, pipelines shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even if they shift a little bit, it's important to get that locate to know exactly
Yeah.
where that is so you don't hit it.
For sure. And TSA works very closely with the Ontario Regional Common Ground Alliance in terms of developing best practices for industry. In fact, the ORCJ last year was one of our safety award winners, and so I would say to anybody out there who's sees people or companies who are involved in a great safety culture to submit nominees to TSSA for this year's awards that will be coming up probably throughout the next few months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are some of the issues that you are seeing that are popping up, particularly around new building construction?
Well, we have to, again, with new building construction, you have to be careful that, that you're, if you are excavating, because quite often new construction sites have already been serviced. And so, again, you have to be very cautious about, what could be in the ground. And, if you're a contractor or a builder, even just running heavy equipment across some of the fuel lines will sometimes force them to the service or the heavy equipment can dig into the ground and disturb and grab a hold of lines and break them. And again, you have this danger of gas not only right at that spot, but it can migrate and get into other buildings and cause a danger too. So we need to be careful of that. I think the other thing we should be mindful of is, unfortunately, we haven't had an issue here in Ontario with this. Is the fuel utilities have what they call a cross-bore program.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens in that situation is often fuel distributors will install lines through a torpedo method. So they're driving something underground and pulling a line across, and occasionally they'll intersect a sewer lateral going to a home. And so you may just think you've got this normal tree root or something blocking a sewer lateral.
Pull it through.
And you send a cutter down there and you actually cut a gas line, and it causes a very serious injury. So if you're in that kind of a situation as a homeowner or a building owner and you think you might have a plugged line, I would encourage people to contact the fuel distributors first, and they will gladly send somebody around very quickly to ascertain. They'll send a camera down there and make sure that you don't have a gas line intersecting your fuel line instead of a route that you might pull out and inadvertently cause a danger.
Because it's in their best interest too that an incident doesn't happen.
Absolutely, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are facing other seasonal kind of concerns that we should pay attention to.
Absolutely, Greg. I think, as we move into the season, with the warmer weather, we get into people who are wanting to, have outdoor activities and barbecues and picnics. And so I would say, there's a certain amount of safety precautions we should take around barbecues. And I mean, a lot of us have them, but there's some things you have to do about, making sure you store the propane cylinder outside, and when you're starting up, maybe after the barbecue sat all winter, just, take a look at the hoses to make sure they're not cracked.
Clean the ports.
Clean the ports out to, if the spiders get in there and block those ports, you'll get a flashback, or you could get a flashback. And if you're connecting that tank again for the first time, just a bit of soap and water solution to make sure that the joints aren't leaking. And again, when you're lighting it, open the lid. I mean, these all seem like, self-evident things, but they're things that we see out there from time to time, and people need to be conscious of that this is a piece of fuel-fired equipment that's intended to be something that's people's in attendance with. So, don't turn on, walk away, and leave it, and just, be mindful of some basic safety things so that we're all safe throughout the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of along similar lines, I think, we'll get into the summer, and the May 2-4 weekend will be here, and we'll all be out camping and doing those things. Again, camp heaters, we've had a number of issues with camp heaters over the years where these are fuel-fired equipment. They're intended to be used in well-ventilated areas. So camp heaters and even coolers that are propane-fired these days can produce a lot of carbon monoxide, and they're not intended to be inside the tent or your van or your cabins. Like, if you're going to use that stuff, use it outside where it can be well ventilated, so that we've had issues with serious injuries and even fatalities with this equipment because it's been used indoors.
I guess part of the challenge is that the user believes that it's designed and manufactured in a safe way. I don't have to take any responsibility. Well, that's not true.
That's not true. We all have to, review the instructions that come with that, and know how that we should properly maintain those things, and how to properly use them safely. So, to put equipment indoors that was designed to be outdoors, they'll produce carbon monoxide, and you could get overcome.
I guess the analogy would be the care that you put in with your car, which is another fuel-fired equipment.
Right.
Should be put, just as much care that you put there should be put towards any other fuel-fired equipment.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, it's, in broad sense, I mean, the things that we see most often when there's issues is lack of maintenance. It's a common occurrence across all the different things that we look at, and so I would also like to take this opportunity to, as we come to an end of a heating season, and we want to forget about the furnace and that for now, it's a good time to have it maintained and cleaned and inspected, and have it ready for that next cold snap that unfortunately will come.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the water heater and everything else is connected to any kind of fuel system, right?
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead.
You have, speaking of maintenance, you've also been working on another high priority issue, which you've titled Special Buildings Inspection for vulnerable populations.
Yeah.
And you are seeing it's mostly kind of maintenance related.
It is. There's. You're right. We've been running a program for a little over a year now, and so initially we did a number of inspections and found a lot of non-compliance in that particular sector. And as you said, the leading cause on that first round was a lot to do with maintenance. Mm-hmm. And so TSSA undertook to make our stakeholders and building owners and contractors aware of what we're finding, and did a whole public education awareness session with those folks. And then we conducted some additional inspections through the fall. And while we still found a lot of non-compliance, what was somewhat encouraging is that maintenance wasn't top of the list anymore. It was fairly well down there, so that was encouraging. Still work to do with the sector in terms of showing them what we're finding and deciding what kind of final activities we'll take with that particular sector, whether it's we need to do some more awareness or we need to do some inspections and that kind of thing. So we'll be meeting with our stakeholders and their regulatory authorities over the next little while just to figure out what would be the most appropriate way to bring this sector into compliance.
Now, the second phase is coming into effect. What's coming up next?
So the whole special buildings it's a broad category of buildings, and so in phase one we looked at retirement and long-term care type facilities. The second phase was designed to start to look at other assembly buildings like schools, for instance. So we had kind of had that as part of our phase two for next year. But we were contacted by the Toronto District School Board and their Operation and Maintenance Committee to come in and talk to them about that. So they were interested in partnering with us and looking at ways that we could help bring the schools into compliance and make sure that their facilities were all safe. So we're just in the process of working with those folks now to look at some kind of a work plan that we'll have to work in conjunction with them as our safety partners to make sure that schools are compliant and their maintenance issues are taken care of and that kind of thing. So very, very encouraging to be contacted by outside stakeholders and wanting to partner with us.
What's their reception been like?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, they reached out to TSSA several months ago now, and we went and did an initial presentation, and they really liked what they saw and said, yeah, we're on board here and let's work together.
I guess they understand too that we're talking about a really vulnerable population, so we have to make sure that things are looked after in a safe manner.
For sure.
Now, you also do a lot of consultation in other areas. TSSA stands on a lot of code committees, and you're constantly upgrading what the use of new technology or new things that are discovered get updated in codes. Now, you've developed a new process for what TSSA calls their code adoption documents. What's the new process about?
So as you said, Greg, I mean, codes are revised on a continual basis, and generally they go in 5-year cycles. And so this year is a particularly heavy cycle with respect to a number of new codes that are coming into being this year. So what TSSA has done in the past is, we sit on these code committees and help develop the codes and evolve them to look at new processes and new technologies. And then at the end of the cycle, CSA, for instance, or another code group they publish the new national standard, and then TSSA will adopt that. Sometimes we like to make some changes to suit the Ontario market, and so we might make some changes to the national code, and we do that through the process called code adoption. And so generally in the past, we've involved the kind of the immediate stakeholders and making sure that they understand the changes and what we'd like to do. And but we've evolved that process somewhat now, and so we're being much more we're broadening our collaboration audience and our consultation audience to make sure that we capture and contact as many stakeholders as possible and others who could be impacted by the new codes to make sure they understand what the changes are, what the impacts will be, but also it provides them with an opportunity to provide some commentary back to us to say, did you think of this, did you think of that? And so I think it's an all-around improvement to our whole process that it continues to evolve like any process, and you look for ways to improve it and make it better, and this is what we're doing with this. And it slowed us down a little bit this year in terms of getting all the new codes out there this year. We had really hoped to have most of the codes out by the first of the year, but we're delayed a little bit, but we think that's important to have this broader consultation. So we're still hoping to fuel oil and the pipelines code adoption documents are pretty much ready now, and they're just going through their final edits in paper flow, and those will be available. So once we actually publish the code adoption document, then there'll be a 60-day grace period, And that allows industry and stakeholders to get ready for it, perhaps use up some existing stock that might not be allowed
Up to code.
at the new code. And so we don't want to unfairly burden and negatively impact people, so we give them this grace period to get ready.
Mm-hmm. How do you actually run the consultations?
Consultations are done, there's different ways we do it, but our first and main one is our risk reduction groups. So these are meetings with all our industry experts and stakeholders out there who we talk about, we show them what we think we'd like to propose, get their input on it, and then once we're finished with that, we send it out, and then we send it out to as many stakeholders and associations that we're aware of that would have need to be aware of what's going on, and then make sure that they're sometimes
It could be like a town hall, could be a
It could be.
webinar.
yes, we're just planning some webinars and that now for in the next couple of months to make them aware of the new codes that are coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's been done already for fuel oil rather successfully.
Yes.
And do with.
And we've done it with liquid fuels. We've done
fuels.
it with fuel oil. Yes, it's proved to be very beneficial to those. I think that broader audience had an opportunity to participate. I think they found that valuable.
I guess the one question that's connected to it is once the new code comes into effect, how much can I play with the old code and where's the line, right?
Well, general principle is that we don't impose new codes retroactively. So if something was okay to do yesterday, it'll be okay to do tomorrow, even though we have a new code. And the only caveat to that is if there's some significant high risk or safety issue we're trying to address, then we might impose something retroactively. But generally, anything that met the code yesterday is okay for the new code.
Mm-hmm. It's more along the lines of new safe practices that go
Exactly.
forward.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's great. You've got a lot of things on the go. There's always new developments to support new safety approaches and providing Ontario with a safe environment. And now that spring is in the air, we're going to have another season where things are moving safely.
For sure. For sure. It's as we move into new seasons, we do different activities, and we just need to be mindful of some different safety precautions that we need to take.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks for being with us today, John.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more TSA Safety Matters.